Let's see a show of hands. In the last week, how many of you have seen a homeless person asking for change on the sidewalk or a busy off-ramp? Okay, that's most of you. Now, how many of you handed over some readily available change? Okay, for those who did, keep your hands up if you truly believe your donation made a difference in changing that person's status as homeless. Right, none. In effect, you spent some money and had little expectation of improvement, possibly due to some assumptions about that person's failings, and maybe alleviated some of your guilt. This micro example, in a very simplified way, describes our current approach to homelessness, except for the fact that we are spending a lot more than small change. According to Dennis P. Culhane, Associate Professor of Social Welfare Policy at the University of Pennsylvania, a considerable amount of public dollars is spent essentially maintaining people in a state of homelessness. But it doesn't have to be that way. To really address chronic homelessness, research suggests the local government should adopt the housing first model as a best practice. It drastically reduces drains of public health and safety resources and results in major cost savings and longer term housing security. I will be presenting research that shows how the housing first model leads to a drastic reduction in utilization of jails, prison bookings, emergency rooms, sobering services, psychiatric hospitals, all of which cost taxpayers a great deal. Even with the most severe and chronic cases, major cost savings result while increasing housing security for participants. Cities, states, and counties employing the housing first model are finding significant cost savings. When trying to make sense of that, it is important to understand what costs are typically associated with homeless populations. Drug treatment facilities, temporary shelters, domestic violence resources, mental health and psychiatric services, hospitals, emergency rooms, police, courts, jails, and prisons, all at a significant cost to communities. A study done by the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, tracked costs incurred by a group for a year prior to being placed in Housing First, and for the following 2 years. During the 2 years since moving into Moore's Place, tenants visited emergency rooms 648 fewer times, an 81% reduction. And were in the hospital 292 fewer days, a 62% reduction than the 2 prior years. This led to a $2.4 million decrease in total billing, a drop of nearly 70%. These savings were just healthcare related. In addition to healthcare costs, the group at Moore Place also saw a 68% drop in arrests and 84% fewer days spent in jail. These findings are consistent with King County Department of Community and Human Services report 2013 on the reduction of costs for 3,000 tenants in housing first placements. In the first year, they found average bookings and jail cost reductions of almost $8,000 per person. For the 3,000 people in the program, that is $24 million cost in jail utilization alone. The study analyzed cost savings in other areas as well, such as psychiatric hospitals, emergency departments, and sobering services. Combined with jail utilization, they saw a cost of as much as $33,125 per person in 1 year. Multiply that by 3,000, and now you're looking at a potential savings of almost $100 million. An analysis of service utilization for the year prior to and following housing placement for the group showed significant utilization reductions. Jails declined by almost 65%, from a total of 4,272 days to 1,564 days, and bookings declined at over 50%. Sober center admissions declined by 88.8%, from a total of 2,812 to 314 admissions. Community psychiatric hospitals declined by almost 70%. Emergency department episodes declined by 66%. Shelter days declined by 95%. Utah has become the most famous example of a housing first success story. The widely cited statistics is that they reduced chronic homelessness statewide by 91% since 2005, when the entire state adopted a housing first approach. They did this while reducing average cost per person from $2,000 a year to $20,000 a year to $8,000 a year. In every study of the cost analysis done with Housing First, there are dramatic savings. But that wouldn't matter if the method failed to provide the services needed to ensure long-term housing security. Research shows that Housing First does improve outcomes while saving money. At the Downtown Emergency Services Center in Seattle, Washington, 95 people were housed without any requirements to engage in services related to health, addiction, and job training. Despite the voluntary nature, there was 100% participation. The director, Bill Hobson, explains, Housing First is predicated on the idea that if you limit the chaos of homelessness, clinical stability will follow. People do not get better when they're on the street, constantly under stress. But when that's gone, I think people tend to respond to when assistance is offered. An address is also key to applying for a job or certain other government benefits. Once people have a steady base, accessing help they need to tackle their obstacles become much easier. The Housing First model provides service delivery through coordinated teams that all have access to the diagnosis and treatments being offered. Assertive community treatment services are voluntary. Participants are able to choose from a variety of offerings, from psychiatric counseling, money management, job training, drug and alcohol treatment, etc. Levels of participation and success or failure have no impact on their housing status. For example, if someone relapses into substance abuse, they do not automatically lose their home, as in the case with most traditional programs. Small successes are celebrated and built upon, and people are given an unlimited chance to succeed. Furthermore, after clients are housed and away from the war zone of life on the streets, they are much likely to seek treatment for mental health problems and substance abuse voluntarily. Clients have reported that having an apartment of their own, sometimes for the first time, gives them something they want to hold on to. People who are priorly labeled treatment resistant participated at a rate at over 65% in psychiatric treatment alone. The explanation of this seems obvious, but flies in the face of almost all other approaches that include punitive and involuntary elements. A study published in the Journal of Community and Applied Social Psychology compared over 2 years large samples of chronically homeless people who suffer from psychiatric disabilities and substance abuse. One sample group engaged in a traditional continuum of care program. These are a collection of uncoordinated services ranging from drop-in shelters, hospitalizations, limited access to free or low-cost drug and mental health counseling, and longer-term housing. Longer-term housing is only available to those who meet treatment and sobriety prerequisites, also referred to as housing readiness. The other sample group participated in the Housing First program, which provided immediate access to independent apartments and supportive services without any preconditions. Proponents of the continuum of care approach argue that giving homes to people who have not proved themselves to be housing ready is setting them up for failure. However, the study found that once people were safely housed, what followed was readiness for treatment and care. Hospitalizations for the housing group first were cut in half during the first year of the study, and participation in drug and alcohol treatment was significantly higher and led to a long-term recovery for this group as well. The other group saw a much higher rates of psychiatric hospitalizations, institutionalizations, and housing instability. A similar study was done in New York City, which found after 5 years, 88% of the program's tenants remained housed, whereas only 47% of the residents in the city's residential treatment system remained housed. As seen, Housing First results in significant cost savings across all points of service, and does so while increasing successful service delivery and long-term housing security. Now I'll take a few questions. By giving homeless people homes without prerequisites, aren't you just rewarding laziness? When you examine the major causes of homelessness, it's a lot more complex than simply laziness. For example, in 2005, 50% of the U.S. cities surveyed reported that domestic violence is the primary cause of homelessness. Between 20 and 25% of homeless people are considered severely mentally ill. Also, a serious injury or illness in the family could result in insurmountable expenses for hospitalizations, tests, and treatment. For many, this forces a choice between hospital bills or their rent. Also, in accordance with the laws of supply and demand, rents have continued to rise as vacancy rate has continued to fall. In 2013, there were only 34 affordable units for every 100 extremely low income renters. This is because there was an affordable housing shortfall of 3.9 million units for this population. Some may ask, shouldn't we be spending money on more important things like schools or roads? And as I showed before, the Housing First model leads to significant cost savings. This is money that could be freed up for expenditures such as schools or roads. Additionally, people who are in Housing First programs also have dramatically higher employment outcomes. Traditional approaches might see an employment rate of only 10 to 21%, while Housing First participants maintain up to an 80% employment. So not only is there a major reduction in cost to serve this population, they're also joining the pool of employed taxpayers, further adding to city and municipal budgets. Now, most housing programs require people to get clean and sober from drugs and alcohol before receiving housing. If Housing First gives people homes before they get clean, what incentive do they have to get and maintain drug-free lifestyle? Drug and alcohol abuse can be a cause of homelessness, but it also at times is a result of being homeless. Substance abuse is also highly intertwined with victimization from physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, as well as mental and physical health issues. Getting clean is nearly impossible without a safe, stable base that allows for easy access to health services and counseling, as well as supportive social network. Once people have their basic survival needs met, they get proper health care and counseling, and the incentive is to continue on a trajectory of improvement. Thank you.